Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hello again, welcome back. Firstly, thank you so much, Brenda Schofield, for that fantastic introduction to the Samaritans. As a former Samaritans volunteer myself, I can vouch for every single word that she just said. Afternoon, and welcome to this talk entitled Art in Hong Kong. My name is Lee Williamson. I'm the president of the FCC. Now, is our city a cultural desert? Or is it an unparalleled leader of the region's booming contemporary art market? And how has the last 5 years, a time of unprecedented legal and social change in Hong Kong, affected the city's art sector? In her new book, Art in Hong Kong, Portrait of a City in Flux, Enid Tsui offers an incisive analysis of the challenges and the opportunities that lie ahead, as the city sits at a critical crossroads in its bid to be a global arts hub as well as a global finance center. Enid Tsui is the arts editor at the South China Morning Post, where she covers the art market, exhibitions, performances, and cultural policies. A former financial journalist who was with the FT for almost a decade, Enid also has a master's in art history from the University of Hong Kong. During this talk, I'm going to ask Enid to expand on the analysis she presents in her new book. We'll discuss the Hong Kong art world's past, present, and future, as well as the possible paths forward as Hong Kong attempts to develop itself into a global art hub. Before we do that, please join me in welcoming Enid Tsui.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, Enid, great to see you. I use a term in my introduction to your gasp of cultural desert, which is something which has somewhat stuck over the years.
Very much so.
One of the things that really jumped out to me about the book in your reporting is you uncovered the slightly ironic origin of this term. Right? Can you tell us more?
Because in the early 20th century, when a lot of Chinese intellectuals were coming through Hong Kong during a period of great turmoil in China, they already noticed that Hong Kong was not a cultural desert. Lu Xun, one of the most famous Chinese writers ever, gave a speech here and said, "Oh, Hong Kong is not a cultural desert." But the last two words were the only ones that people remembered. So
people missed out the
not. Up to now, this trope is still being rehashed over and over again, and you still see occasionally in actually official press releases saying, "Oh, Hong Kong is no longer a cultural desert." Like saying that in 2020, well, last time I saw it, I think was 2024. So saying that in 2024 is kind of old. Yeah.
So the original fake news.
It's the original.
Ago, people were still saying that. Now, there are a lot of competing factors at play, right, that are both helping and hindering Hong Kong's bid to become a global art hub. There's the opening, on the plus side, of these three huge institutions in the past 5 years, in M+, Palace Museum, and Tai Kwun. There's also the robust tax breaks. There's Hong Kong's status as a free port. And there's also the fact that the world's biggest auction houses have doubled down on Hong Kong in the last couple of years, cementing Hong Kong as the HQ of Phillips, Christie's, and Sotheby's. Conversely, there's also the looming specter of censorship and the shifting of so-called red lines that threaten to curtail the city's once vibrant culture. So I'm going to start with a big first question, Enid. Get out your crystal ball. What will the Hong Kong art scene look like in 10 years, in 2035?
Can I just say that you used the word looming. Well, it's very much here, has been for a while. So, but I think the roller coaster ride that is Hong Kong's art scene will continue. I mean, this is an extremely volatile time for the whole world, and if you just focus on the visual arts, which is what this book does, so the book doesn't cover the performing arts. That would be another book that hopefully somebody will write soon. We've had more highs in Hong Kong, as you mentioned, than many other sectors in Hong Kong. At the same time, suddenly, just bam, you get reminded that don't be too confident. So, for example, yesterday came news of the cancellation of the Digital Art Fair, which first started in 2021. And so that became the third event, if I'm not mistaken, the third event to be cancelled in Hong Kong Super March, which is the new term for March. Sorry, I mean to be sorry.
Trademark, Super March.
Yeah, sorry. So, and also art practitioners, artists, curators, people who work in major venues, like they are continuing to negotiate and to discover what living under NSL means, and it's still being revealed because it's so censorship or the rules are not specific.
So photo fairs and digital art fairs, from what your sources are telling you, were these cancelled because of censorship or business?
There may be people in this room who know more than I do, but from what I've heard is I think it's commercial and funding. So, for example, the Digital Art Fair, from the SCMP's report, they applied for government funding and they didn't get it. So back to your question, sorry. Resources will become more selective, I think, in the next few years. At the moment, as everybody here knows, the economy is not doing so well. And so when you have more people, and there's a lot of artists, a lot of art projects, new venues coming up, a lot of people going after public resources, which is a big deal in Hong Kong. A lot of it is being handed out by the Arts Development Council. The rules are being tightened now, not necessarily about politics. It's to do with limited resources. So people will have to start doing not just more, but just doing things that are smarter and more impactful, perhaps. Because we all go on about how Hong Kong needs to build audience, like in every sector, right? And the contemporary art scene, yeah, you see the big headlines, record sums paid for a painting in an auction or whatever. But the contemporary art scene, people actually go and see art regularly. People, the number of collectors and so on, that growth we have yet to see. Sorry, this is a really long question.
It's a big question. Let me follow up. So you're talking about how the funding may well contract somewhat. Let's look at all of the investment that has been poured into the sector over the past decade.
Yeah.
When Art Basel first opened in 2013, it seemed to some like a slightly strange choice when Art Basel was going to have its Asia outpost, because Hong Kong was seen as this cultural desert, as we're saying. Since then, 2013, just 12 years ago, we've seen the opening of M+, Tai Kwun, the Palace Museum, the renovation of the Hong Kong Museum of Art, of course, as well. How much of an impact have these cultural institutions had on the city's arts ecosystem, and what more do they need to be
It's been enormous.
What more needs to be done to help to kind of grow the city?
And that's the funny thing about Hong Kong. Art Basel, I mean, that's probably Hong Kong's, before M+, Art Basel Hong Kong is probably Hong Kong's most famous art brand. And it's not even Hong Kong, right? It's a Swiss company. But the market has always played a mega role in the Hong Kong art scene. But the ecosystem is very diverse, has always been diverse, and they all work together to make it all work. And I think Hong Kong's ecosystem is quite balanced, especially now that the big independent institutions have appeared. Because before, if you go and see art, if you want to see art, you go to a gallery or you go to the auction previews. And I love the auction previews. But what we lacked were consistently high quality, well-curated, large-scale exhibitions that we're now seeing more of in West Kowloon and other institutions like Tai Kwun, and also Chat, which was, I think, has become far more successful than anybody thought it would be, because this is a non-profit contemporary art institution out in Chunwan that only focuses on fabric art. And yet, year after year, it's consistently pushed out excellent exhibitions that well visited. So yeah, it's fuller, the ecosystem is much fuller, but I think it will only become more diverse partly because of geopolitics. I'm not saying that, people are going to stop looking at Western art or American art, because of what's going on. No, it's just basic curiosity. People just starting. I talk to Hong Kong collectors, and they say, "Oh yeah, we're all flying to we're all flown back from Sharjah, Middle East, Saudi Arabia, or certainly many places in Southeast Asia with a lot of art fairs, biennials, and so on." It's just this insatiable curiosity about what's going on everywhere else apart from in North America and in Europe, which has that unipolar, that thing that's dominated art history for generations. Yeah, so I'm hopeful that we're going to see a lot more of different things in Hong Kong.
You mentioned some of the kind of competing hubs in the region. Hong Kong has the ambition to be a global art hub, which means it needs to be really the biggest hub in Asia. Where does Hong Kong stand in a wider Asian context compared with its contemporaries like Seoul and Tokyo and Singapore in terms of its jostling for influence?
I think Hong Kong is still very strong. Of course, it shouldn't be necessarily simplified as a competition. It should all grow together, Asia. But at the same time, there are these basic fundamental things that haven't changed. The one most fundamental thing, when we're talking about buying and selling, tax. There's been a lot of discussion about the recent trade tariffs. So as far as I know, if you're exporting art to America now from mainland China, there's a 7.5% tariff. But that has not been applied to Hong Kong yet.
Nervous laughter around the room.
But anyway, overall, Hong Kong is still the most tax-friendly and logistically one of the most efficient places in the region to buy and sell art. And I think it takes quite a lot to knock that down. And also there seems to be the desire in Hong Kong, both from the private sector and the government, to invest in, say, art storage. Now, we don't know when Skytopia is going to be built because I don't think the funding's not there yet. But obviously there's been some cynicism about all these big mega infrastructure projects.
This is a big government-backed infrastructure project to increase art storage, right? Just to clarify.
Well, it's supposed to be like an all-in-one place near the airport where there are lots and lots of things, but including a place where art can be made, stored, and sold. But there's been very little details. But I think the one thing that people are quite happy about is the promise of art storage space, because with anything in Hong Kong, it's just no space, right?
Yeah.
So that would be a plus. There's a new art logistics company founded by a Hong Kong collector recently, soft launching, promising to bring more sustainable and efficient solution that's not here, and high quality solution here to international collectors. So I think there's a bit of leveling up that has to be done to keep this extremely expensive city competitive. Because yes, during the pandemic, when Hong Kong was isolated, just about every single city in Asia started their own art fairs, and many more biennials. That's one thing that Hong Kong hasn't got. Hong Kong doesn't have an art biennial. An art biennial is, the most famous, biggest one is, of course, the Venice one, right? Venice Art Biennale. They are, well, I suppose, mega events, that are very rich in content, not just about selling. I wonder if Hong Kong will decide to have one in the future.
Is there space in, what's it called, Epic March? What are we calling it?
Super March.
Super March. Is there space in Super March? March Madness, Super March is too much. So the art storage is one big government initiative that you just spoken about. In November last year, the government published a blueprint for arts, culture, and creative industries development, which had a total of 71 measures which it announced it was going to do. What do you think are the most significant announcements of these 71 that's part of the government's blueprint? And what do these priorities tell us about what the government is thinking and what it's trying to do moving forward?
It's a much delayed blueprint, and Sod's Law, much delayed blueprint, came out just after my book was sent to the printers. But there's a lot in it that's to be expected. So a lot on Hong Kong being, things you've heard over the last few years, a lot. Hong Kong being a cultural bridge between East and West, which was mandated by Beijing in the 14th Five-Year Plan. Hong Kong promoting Chinese heritage, traditional culture. But also, I think importantly, there is this promise that Hong Kong must remain diverse and cosmopolitan, representing the arts and culture of non-Chinese communities in Hong Kong, for example, that's written down. Surprising things, the promise, or I don't know, it depends on who you are, promise or threat, I don't know, to shake up the funding of the 9 mega performing arts groups. So that's not visual arts, that's outside the scope of the book, surely, but that would be a big deal. So we're talking about Hong Kong Philharmonic, Hong Kong Sinfonietta, Hong Kong Ballet, and all the other ones, which have been receiving a lot of government funding for all these years and have become very big brands for Hong Kong. There's also adjustment to Arts Development Council funding, which may make it harder for smaller groups, I think, to get money. So there's a lot in there. It was pointed out to me yesterday, actually. I was moderating this panel for the London-based Association of Women in the Arts. And one person pointed out that even though the word sustainable appears many times in the report, it doesn't mean green, not that kind of sustainability. So there's no mention of going for low carbon and any of that. So I think some people may be a bit disappointed by that. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that Hong Kong remains still an amazing place to buy and sell art. And as we've covered a couple of times, 3 big auction houses have all invested significantly in Hong Kong over the past few years. Phillips with his flagship in M+, and Christie's in the Henderson Sotheby's, with more of a focus on retail in the Landmark as well. But as you cover in your book, auction sales are down. The Spring Marquee evening auctions dropped 40% year on year in 2024. So what can we read both into the investment and the seemingly cementing of their positions in Hong Kong, but also conversely, some of these declining sales figures? What does this mean for the art world, and do you see these revenue figures picking up soon?
First of all, figures in the art market are to be taken with a pinch of salt because it's one of the most not transparent markets in the world, right? But it may, those figures that you just cited may suggest that the Henderson and the Landmark Sotheby's Maison are not very well timed, right? But at the same time, we're seeing Supermarch will bring something new. Supermarch will bring, finally, the synchronization of auction houses. What I'm talking about is that up until in 2024, Sotheby's, Christie's abandoned their long time model of having separately the spring and autumn auctions with everything sold under one roof at the Wan Chai Convention and Convention Exhibition Center. I mean, I kind of miss them because I really like going to the previews where you can see everything, right? So there's worry that with the houses doing their own thing, bitty, like one category at a time, spread out at different times during the year, they're not going to get critical mass. But I noticed that Phillips, Christie's, Sotheby's, and also the Chinese auction houses, Poly, Guardian, they're all having auctions, most of them modern and contemporary art, in the same week as Art Basel in Hong Kong. So we will see whether that will bring more collectors all here during that time. At the same time, when I say that the numbers themselves may not tell the whole story, generally in the all over the world, globally now, there is a shift towards more private buying, more private sales, so completely hidden. And because if you're a collector and you're buying spending $100 million on a painting, you may not want people to know that.
There's a trend from fewer big sales events to smaller sales.
Auction houses doing more private deals on the side.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you won't see the art because the exhibition there are still exhibitions, selling exhibitions held within these new venues now that the auction houses have opened. For example, there's a Picasso one coming up at Phillips, so that's a selling exhibition, so private sales. You will not find out how much they're sold for or whether they get sold or not. And I think a lot of money is changing hands in that segment. At the same time, galleries in Hong Kong are still finding a lot of new clients appearing in their exhibitions and buying, and a lot of young, often tech entrepreneurs, from not just Shanghai, Beijing, but second, third tier Chinese cities, which is very encouraging because, yes, we talk about, Singapore, will they take over? Because there's one of the strongest quotes, most worrying quotes in my book came from Magnus. Magnus ran through the former FCC board member and co-founder of ArtHK, one of the first major international art fair that was bought by by Art Basel and turned into Art Basel Hong Kong. He said in his book on Hong Kong art quite a few years ago now that Hong Kong is, let me look it up. Hong Kong is the only place in the world where, it is here somewhere, never mind. Only place in the world where which is neutral and where everybody can feel at home. So to my surprise, I think last year or the year before, 2023, when he started Art SG, the new art fair in Singapore, he used exactly the same words to talk about Singapore. So you can, this narrative of Hong Kong no longer being a world city, but only just another Chinese city. You can say whatever people have very strong views about it. I'm sure people here in this room have very strong and different views about it. It's the only one, but optics, international optics do matter. At the same time, Hong Kong can still, I was going to say crow about, but no, it can still celebrate a number of very important things. One, the Chinese economy, Greater China economy, is still huge compared to Southeast Asia. So Singapore, for example, Indonesians, Malaysians going to Singapore, yes, of course they have a group of billionaires there, but nowhere near the mass in Greater China. Geographic advantage that's permanent. Yeah, we are just easy to get to from all over. And also, I think I mentioned in the book that there was a time in 2020, 2021 when the moods were really, it was terrible. It was a terrible time. Everybody's losing confidence. And then we have this big queer art exhibition. Big queer art exhibition at Daeguan, which is, as all of you know, a jockey club run venue. Spectral synthesis, an exhibition based on Sun Pride Foundation's massive collection. That party, that opening party was just heartwarming. Oops, sorry. Everybody was just there celebrating the fact that we can still see this in Hong Kong. And it's no small thing, because in Singapore, queer art cannot be shown, not because the art world people don't want to show it, but the police won't let them, even though gay sex has been decriminalized since 2021, I think, yeah. And also a lot of the up-and-coming new art market darlings in the Middle East, obviously, a lot cannot be shown there. So there's all that, and plus what's happening in the States and Europe, the new kinds of censorship. So I think that by 2023, more diversity, perhaps more international talents may choose to come to Hong Kong, come back to Hong Kong.
You mentioned bias in the tech world as well. I guess Hong Kong remains still the best place to buy a banana for $6 million and eat it in the peninsula.
Indeed.
We still have that.
Yeah.
We're the best place to buy a $6 million banana. You dedicate a whole chapter of your book, Enid, to M+, Hong Kong's global museum.
Let's talk about M+.
5 chapters, you spent a whole chapter speaking about just M+. Why is the success of M+ so crucial to the success of Hong Kong as an arts hub as a whole? And what headwinds does it face, both politically and commercially?
Well, sorry, Magnus is not here, right? But it's such a colorful quote. What he talked about, Hong Kong being neutral and where everybody can feel at home. M+ is a symbol of that, because compared to major, well-established art museums in the region, M+ is very unusual in that it's not a national museum. It's not a national art museum, though it does. It does give a lot of room in the galleries as well as in its collections to local makers. But just look at the curatorial team. I mean, so Hania Raphael, Sri Lankan-born Australian, Dorian Chung, Korean-born American, and so on and so on. And so it is a very important symbol for Hong Kong and what Hong Kong culture stands for, as well as having this amazing collection of art, which is built on what Uli Sig, the Swiss collector, part donated and part sold to the museum, because no museum could possibly afford to buy all that from the market, because contemporary art from China, especially made in the 80s and 90s, have become extremely expensive and rare in the market. And it's just great to be able to just go in and see all that. And also, apart from what's being shown in the museum, I noticed that because M+ runs a lot of sort of cross-disciplinary events and talks, so films, or architecture, fashion, and so on, you get, like before, you only get this sudden rush of international visitors, like, big shots in March. And now it's like, it's a steady stream. Like Tilda Swinton coming to Hong Kong last month, that sort of thing. So it's enormous. And it's been a big brand for Hong Kong internationally as well, especially since M+ was given the task of presenting the Hong Kong Pavilion in the Venice Biennale in trying to get the year right.
2021?
I think so, right, yeah. So the budget that the Hong Kong Pavilion had under M+ became much bigger. And the whole thing became much bigger. And M+ changed the way the Hong Kong Pavilion presents art. It became solo exhibitions and very conceptual. So that's the sort of thing that I think people like in Venice, which is where the world's top people from contemporary art gather to see what's going on, what's at the front of the curve. And so it is, I think, with a bit of trepidation that we are now receiving news that the next Hong Kong Pavilion in Venice will be handled by the Hong Kong Museum of Art. So there's very little information on what they're going to do yet, but we'll wait and see.
What do you think the reason might be for that decision? For the Hong Kong Museum of Art to administer the submission for Venice Biennale rather than M+?
I don't know. I'll try and find out.
Okay, thank you. We would love to have you back and ask you what's going on there. So you talk about the amazing opportunities that M+ has created and the space that it has created as well, and as well its unique position of not being a national museum, what that enables it to do, and its incredible pieces from the SIG collection. I do want to follow up, though, Enid, about some of the headwinds. So firstly, commercially, M+ has been in the headlines a lot over the last year or so with regards to its funding. Recently, reports of it selling parcels of its land and so on. What are some of the kind of commercial headwinds it's facing, and how do you see that playing out?
We still don't know how much it cost. We don't know how much they spent on M+. The taxpayers were supposed to be told, where are we now? 3 or 4 years ago, but there's no word on that. And I don't know if the contractors have all been paid.
So that was because of a dispute with the original contract.
Because there was, remember, all that Xinjiang, the main contractor going bust, and all that mess, yeah. So it was a real mess. Mm-hmm. And then there were all these, unexpected challenges to do with the high-speed railway tunnel and, land sinking and all that. So all that cost, they probably went way over budget. But that's one sum. In terms of the operational budget, that has been challenging too. And so what M+ has had to really focus on is to get private donations, private patrons. And I think that puts it very much in the lead in Hong Kong when it comes to what everyone may well have to do more of as public funding becomes more selective and harder to get. But what does that mean to the programming? That's the big question for us lot going to see the museum.
100%.
So I think the Picasso, there's a Picasso exhibition coming up in March. So the M+ big exhibition in March, the big art month, is Picasso. When I first heard that, I was a bit surprised. Did we, Hong Kong, build M+ to show Picasso? Yeah. Okay, and also there's not a lot of money, so there will be around 60 original works by Picasso, including works on paper. Now, back in 2019, I think, UCCA, the private art space in Beijing in the 798 district, they also worked with the Picasso Museum in Paris. Their Picasso exhibition had 109 original works by Picasso. Does that mean the M+ Picasso exhibition will be less of a deal? Not necessarily, because this is being billed as the first dialogue between Picasso and a collection of an Asian museum. So it will be, I imagine, sort of half-half, half Picasso, half works by Asian artists, perhaps influenced by earlier Western European art history. There will also be new commissions. So this is if it's done well, then this will be the sort of thing that Hong Kong must do more of. To make an impact, to do things that nobody else in the world can do. Which is, of course, what Singapore is also doing. The Singapore National Gallery has been doing some fantastic exhibitions, writing a new art history of Asia. And I really want to see more of that in Hong Kong. I don't think we have enough.
So what I'm hearing is you think that at the moment, of the way things are going, M+ is doing a very good job of walking that line between curatorial excellence and also kind of commercial success. I do want to ask about some of the political pressures, my final question on M+ as well. You mentioned the Uli Sig collection, which is now the M+ Sig collection of Chinese contemporary art. What is the current status of some of the more incendiary pieces in that collection from the likes of Ai Weiwei, Wang Guangyi, etc., Wang Xingwei?
Well,
where are these pieces right now? Are they currently on display?
Now,
and how are they dealing
I don't
with
think we'll ever see, no, never say ever. I don't think we're going to see Ai Weiwei's middle finger pointing at Tiananmen Square for a long, long time. I think this will be hidden away. As you may all remember, that moment when M+ opened was like, it was a dramatic moment because of the strong reaction that came from the pro-establishment side, threatening to call the police and saying that artworks should be removed from the museum. I think on balance, M+ has been standing quite firm. Of course, there's a group of paintings that were rotated out, like Wang Guangyi's painting that featured a portrait of Mao Zedong looking like it's behind bars. The museum said it's to do with the fact that the paintings needed to be conserved, not shown for too long. Is that the only reason? We don't know. But I just wonder if it's the pressure coming from the commercial side is more than the political side at the moment, looking at the program.
Okay. I'm sure some of you have eager to ask some questions as well, so I'm going to open it up to questions on the floor. If you have a question, please do put your hand up and just identify yourself before you ask your question, please. Yes, gentleman down here first. Microphone will come to you if you just wait just a moment.
Hi, how are you? A member, Houghton Lee, a member of the club for maybe more than a decade. Okay. I am completely an outsider of arts, okay. But I just heard people talk about nowadays arts business is booming in Hong Kong. A lot of great arts were being traded. Just one question: how about the local made art? Do you see? Are there now a flourishing community of local artists, no matter they are native-born artists in Hong Kong, or maybe they from China or from other part of the world, but they decide to have their residence in Hong Kong, and the works are flourishing, a lot of good work, great work, innovative stuff being made in Hong Kong?
I'm so glad you've asked that question because we've forgotten.
We didn't have time to get to it. Yeah, thank you, sir. That was a question we didn't have time to get to.
The book has no pictures. It's a book on the art in Hong Kong, but it has no pictures. It belongs to a whole series published by London Humphreys in London. The whole series called Hot Topics in the Art Book. The whole series has no pictures. So that's why you see on the screen this PowerPoint that I put together. It's a random selection of artists, Hong Kong artists made art over the years, starting from ancient rock carvings to 19th century trade art to what's Hong Kong Pavilion in Venice showed last year. So yeah, there's always been a flourishing art scene in Hong Kong. And there's definitely a lot more opportunities for young artists to show their work in today's Hong Kong than, say, 20 years ago even. And if you go to, there's a lot of, you have mixed news, right, about Hong Kong, and one day you can hear about cancellation of the event, or maybe new signs of political restrictions on funding or whatever, and then you walk into Dai Gun, 5 minutes away from here, and you see excellent exhibitions by young artists. I went to the magical space called Fu Dak Lao in Wan Chai, which is, long may it last. So I don't know if you've been to Fu Dak Lao. If you haven't, just go. Yeah, it's just a building next to a pawn shop full of artist studios. And I went to an experimental art installation just in one room, just one artwork. And it was sort of spine-tingling. It was absolutely amazing. It's completely open to interpretations by two young artists. So there's so much of that happening in Hong Kong. In fact, that's the problem. There's so much happening, but the communication about what's happening is not great. So there's always been talk of the need for a complete, comprehensive listings. Unfortunately, our newspaper doesn't do listings anymore in the new digital age. The tourism board doesn't do it. I think the West Kowloon promises to have a March listings, but so far what I've seen on the Art March, I've forgotten the website, but it's a West Kowloon Art in March website. It's far from complete. I have a friend who's set up a new app attempting to do a complete listing, but it's like one person. So there's a lot going on, but you may not know about it because of that, for that reason, yeah.
Okay, let's go to another question as I see a few hands. Yes, back there.
Hi, thank you very much for your dialogue. That you started with this image of cultural desert. So I wonder if you have an image or a metaphor to describe art in Hong Kong, what would you use?
If I can broaden it out a bit, like the art scene in Hong Kong, it's a roller coaster ride. Really, it's just the highs are very high and the lows are sometimes very low, and I think that's representative of Hong Kong though, and that's why I think the art made here talks about things that a lot of the world are now feeling. Hong Kong has never had the luxury of being sort of sure on its feet because we're so